On this Monday episode of the Locked On Texans podcast, wake up, Houston Texans fans. We got to talk whether or not the Texans should re-sign Dalton Schultz in free agency. Don't go nowhere. Let's talk Texans.
You are Locked On Texans, your daily Houston Texans podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, Texans fans across the nation, across the great state of Texas, and especially here in the city of Houston, to this Monday episode of the Locked On Texans podcast, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I am your Texans football analyst, John, some sports guy Hickman on the other side of the screen, Texans credential media member, Sports Illustrated's own Cody Davis. If this Monday episode is your first time checking us out, first and foremost, thank you guys for watching and listening. Do us a favor, subscribe, like, and comment to the Locked On Texans podcast on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. We promise to become your favorite Texans podcast. We talk Texans every day, Monday through Friday, but for all of our returning listeners, thank you for coming back as Cody and I continue to talk your Houston Texans, and I think we have a very important discussion for today. But we will end off today's show talking more about Andre Johnson.
Yes, sir.
In the second segment, we'll dive into who should walk in free agency. We kick off today's show looking at should the Houston Texans re-sign Dalton Schultz. But I do want to let you guys know a very important message that this episode is brought to you by Prize Picks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code, all lowercase, LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. Normally, I would pass it off to Cody, but I got something on my mind when we look at the Dalton Schultz conversation. And I have a question that I want to pose to you guys once I wrap all of this up. The case for bringing Dalton Schultz back. Number one, reliability. He's played in 90% of the games in his last two seasons, featured in 30 out of 34 games. He's 27 years old, fairly young. He's a vet in this league, so that helps with his age and the experience that he has, that combination. He also has the stamp from his quarterback, who has on multiple occasions mentioned how much he loves playing with Dalton Schultz. And Schultz recently said on 610 Sports Radio that he would love to be back in Houston. There's no doubt about it. He loved his time with the organization, called it a special organization with a special quarterback. He loved the scheme. That's a big bonus. Loved the coaches, loved everything about Houston. So Dalton definitely wants to be back. I think where it gets difficult for some people, myself included, is determining how much and for how long would you like, or the projected ideal situation for Houston to spend to retain him, and whether there's another guy you believe that can replicate that success that would be cheaper. Right now, Spot Rack has Dalton Schultz projected to make around $34 million with a $11.3 million per year salary. Of the available tight ends, Dalton Schultz was the more productive one. He's also younger than the three of the top five available tight ends. I will also like to say that I think a lot of us are getting caught up in two things: how much Brevin Jordan has improved. We look at last year altogether as a player, he improved a lot. And Cody, the conversations around Dalton Schultz, and listeners, the lack of blocking Schultz brings to a team that, regardless of who they have at quarterback, they still want to run that damn ball. We know that. So, Cody and listeners and viewers, the question is, do you go younger? Maybe find a tight end in the draft. I like Theo Johnson out of Penn State, maybe a fourth rounder, or Dalton Hooker, maybe in the fifth round, and save money for Schultz, which is something to lead us into the next segment, and save that money for Schultz, which could be used to find and sign another impact player in free agency? Or do you bring Schultz back to provide the consistency and reliability to your roster in C.J. Stroud? Which way are you leaning?
I'm bringing Dalton Schultz back, because first of all, John, I love how you broke it down because it's similar to the way how I was looking at it. First and foremost, the number one thing that I did, I went out to the free agency market tight end unit, and I was looking to see, is there anybody on this list that I would take over Dalton Schultz? I think the only person that I would take over Dalton Schultz as of right now is Hunter Henry. However, to your point, he's going to be 30 years old at some point. During the next season. And when I look at Dalton Schultz, I mean, yeah, he got a birthday coming up in July, I think is going to be, but he's only going to be like 28 years old. And two, and most importantly, because Dalton Schultz, in that interview that he gave with Sports Radio 610, because he loves the organization, because he loves playing with CJ, has a great relationship with CJ, and he was actually very reliable, I'm pretty sure Dalton Schultz is one of those players, similar to the way how I look at Blake Cashman in a way, to where you're going to have an opportunity to not only bring them back, but bring them back on a very friendly team contract. And you and I have been playing around with this idea, but at this point, it's not even playing anymore because the Houston Texans are on to something special. If we start looking at this team and saying, okay, how can you get into compete and actually win the big game? And by the way, we're recording this the morning of the Super Bowl, so hopefully Usher gave us one of the best halftime performances of all time. But if we're looking at this from a standpoint and we're like, how can the Houston Texans get to the AFC Championship game, get to the Super Bowl, and possibly win the Super Bowl within this next 2 to 3 years while you got majority, if not your entire foundation on these rookie contracts? These are the type of deals that you are definitely hoping for, praying for, and looking for. Having someone that's reliable, someone that is still somewhat in the same time frame as the rest of your young guys, to make sure that you still have somebody that is going to be very productive at a very important position. I understand when you take a look at the improvements that we saw out of Brevin Jordan, and you know me, man, I've been on the Brevin Jordan train ever since he got here.
Listen, what did Brevin Jordan, after control? What did Brevin Jordan say in training camp in terms of just what he wanted to improve on?
He told me he wanted to improve on everything, but more so his blocking. And we saw the improvements that Brevin Jordan has made with his blocking. However, John, I would love to bring Dalton Schultz back and keep Brevin Jordan in that same role, because he didn't have the weight of carrying the quote unquote number one tight end. And two, and most importantly, the way Bobby Sloyd was able to use Brevin Jordan in his scheme was part of the reason why we're looking at Brevin Jordan and saying to ourselves, you know what, that young man has a career year, and I can't wait to see what the future has in store for him. Now, there is one thing that I'm looking at: the addition of Tegan Quatoriano. Does he comes back even healthier? And then that way you already have 3 reliable tight ends. Because the one thing I loved about Tegan Quatoriano going back to his rookie season was the fact that he was actually the best blocking tight end that the Houston Texans have. So that's somebody that you are going to be able to use in a run game too. So I'm all for bringing Dalton Schultz back for all these different scenarios. I would say maybe in the later rounds you can kind of, explore drafting a tight end, and that way you can give him these next couple of years to get his feet under him. So that way in the next 2 to 3 seasons, when you finally move on to Dalton Schultz, you'll have somebody ready that could come in and fill that gap.
You know what? When you listen, when you put it that way, it does sound good, right? You would have 3 tight ends that I would say have 3 different roles. And as much as this team has said on multiple occasions, no tight end will have different roles, or no tight end. I'm sorry. The dad and me keep thinking, but there would be no tight end that would have a specific role. The reality of it is, you do look at Dalton Schultz to be your more receiving tight end. You do look at Brevin Jordan to be one of your combo type of tight ends who can block, shown to be able to do that, gave the effort, and did a very good job in it. And it can leak out and make plays as a receiving tight end at times. You do expect Tegan Quatoriano to be more of your inline, hand in the dirt. We need for you to knock somebody in the dirt type of tight end. We need a block. We need the lane opened up type of tight end. You do look at it that way. But for me, I'm leaning towards going a little bit younger, drafting one of these young tight ends, and saving that money that you can use on Brevin Jordan on maybe another impact player. I think, does Houston have a lot of holes? I think people are going to say no, because once you fill your quarterback role and you have an offensive line like Houston does, regardless of how you guys feel about it, I don't think they need to address necessarily or make it a priority to address the O-line in the draft or free agency. They have guys that can re-sign for cheap and come back. When you look at the guys who they already have locked up, the rookies on their rookie deal, and some of those vets that they brought in when everything was falling apart, you can re-sign some of those guys, right? And so maybe people are not looking at some of the smaller holes that can become bigger holes. And I think when you have some of that additional money, and you got some of the talent that's coming out, I think T.O. Johnson could be a great tight end for TJ. I mean, his footwork is amazing. He blocks very well. He gives the effort in blocking, and he does a very good job of sitting in those zones. And you can see him get some of the yak. I think Dalton Hooker probably could be better if you're looking for a tight end that you really want to replace Dalton Schultz, that role. We need to go get a first down. Dalton Schultz, thank you. But there's a young guy that has shown to be able to be useful, lining up in the slot, picking up that yak yard, being able to just hit different angles and get an extra 10 to 15 yards on some of these catches because his hands are good. He has great hands, by the way. And he just runs well. So if that's what we're going to look at replacing when we have a Brevin Jordan who shown that effort, and Quintoriano, who I'm not sure where he fits into Houston's plans, but he was a good blocker, then maybe that $11.3 million, whatever it was for Dalton Schultz, that contract, maybe that could be used for another impact player on the defensive side of the ball, or you could take that and maybe split it up for two players. You also got to remember, when we look at who the Houston Texans should let walk in free agency, they got some guys that you really want them to bring back. And there's a three-headed monster that I'm looking at. Maybe they don't get it done, and Dalton Schultz is one of them. So we'll talk about that on the other side of the break, who the Houston Texans should let walk. Texans fans, sports fans alike, you know what's fun right now? Prize Picks. It ain't no way around it, guys. With Prize Picks, they have grown to become the #1 fantasy sports app with over 3 million members. The easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. You don't got to play against your friend. You don't got to play against your accountant. You don't got to do none of that, man. You just line them up. It's just you against the numbers. You pick more than, you pick the less than on 2 to 6 player stat projections. You sit back and you can watch the winnings roll in. With Prize Picks, now they have demon time on Prize Picks, which means you can win up to 100 times your money with as little as 4 correct picks. That's right, guys. You can turn $10 into $1,000. You cannot beat that. You can play alongside some of Prize Picks' favorite players like Meek Mill and Andrew Schultz. You can find community plays under the promo tab of the app to view entries from some of the biggest names in the Prize Picks community every week. And they also offer, get this, you're going to love it, they offer the reboot policy. If your player goes out in the first half and doesn't return in the second, that player projection won't count against you, and the rest of your entry stays live. Prize Picks is the only daily fantasy sports platforms that offers an insurance policy. Download the Prize Picks app on your phone or go to prizepicks.com /LockedOnNFL and use code LockedOnNFL for a first-time deposit match up to $100. Welcome back here, Locked On Texans listeners and viewers, to this Monday episode of the Locked On Texans podcast. When we are looking at the Houston Texans, and I think a lot of us are understanding, they are starting to have a window of opportunity for the big game. We're sitting here talking about the Chiefs and the Brock Purdy and the 49ers and their window of success. You're looking at two teams that has been in the Super Bowl at least twice in the last several years. And so how they've done that? Well, they've been smart with their money. Well, they've been able to put together great rosters, whether this year on the defensive side of the ball, when you look at the Kansas City Chiefs, or maybe this year when you look at the offensive side of the ball and building off what they did last year, bringing in Saquon to the Texans is on my mind, but bringing in CMC, who won Offensive Player of the Year, making sure that they have good depth, building more around Brock Purdy. They've done a lot of good things, if I'm saying Fran, and Kansas City to build around this roster. But free agency matters. And when you look at free agency for the Houston Texans, though they are projected to have, I think, a top 5 salary cap this year, some hard and tough decisions will have to be made. And some of those tough decisions, Jonathan Grenard, Dalton Schultz, we just talked about, Sheldon Rankins, would eat up roughly an estimated $35 million of the estimated $60+ million in cash space that would be available according to Spot Rack. I think I want to say right now it's around $62 million, give or take a couple mil. The tough decisions are, do you A, run it back with your guys? Do you run it back with Schultz, Grenard, and Sheldon Rankins? Or do you look at those three and say, you know what? We got to move on from at least one of these players. And to give you guys an insight, Sheldon Rankins will command roughly $10 million according to Spot Rack. Again, Dalton Schultz 11.3 and Jonathan Grenard 13.5. This is all according to Spot Rack.
Man, I'll run it back. I'll run it back, man. And the reason why I say I'll run it back, first and foremost, man, I know right now the money that you're giving is the market value. However, I just truly believe that Dalton Schultz and Jonathan Grenard would definitely come back on a very good hometown discount, because both of them loves the city of Houston, not just the Texans, but the actual city. Both of them definitely wants to come back. And I understand this is part of the season. This is part of the year where it's like, okay, the NFL is truly a business. However, when I at least look at what the production that all three of them gave on the field, all three of those guys have actually had moments where they was basically the best at their position. But it's also, to me, I look at it from a standpoint, you're looking at three guys that really means a lot to that Houston Texans culture, to the Houston Texans locker room, especially like Jonathan Grenard, man. I mean, John, I don't want to spend too much on JG because you and I have had like 2 or 3 shows since the end of the season talking about why it's so important for them to bring back JG. But I mean, it's the reality of the situation. Like, if we are sitting here talking about how can the Houston Texans get to the big game in the next 2 to 3 years, or possibly even as soon as next year, these are some of the tough decisions, to your point, you have to make. And one of those decisions is keeping the core together, because look, you can go out and get somebody that's better at all three, at every single one of these positions. However, will they still have the camaraderie and the chemistry that all three of these guys have established? So yeah, I say bring them back, man. Bring them back. And the best part about bringing them back, and with the Houston Texans being good as now, you bring them back, you have an opportunity, maybe in the mid rounds or the later rounds, to draft their replacement. And the one thing that I love about when you go out and draft these young guys, I feel like the Texans are also in a position where, let's say, for example, you bring in a guy that you think can actually play next to Will Anderson in the next 2 to 3 seasons. You go find him in those mid to late rounds, you give him an opportunity to not only gain the experience, but to go out there and actually learn. So I say bring all three of them back, man. I'm sorry, especially JG.
Well, points were made just like in the first conversation. However, when I look at, what this offseason means in free agency, I wholeheartedly believe John Grenard should return. Mm-hmm. You won't get a dispute out of me from that. And to your point, Cody, there could be a late round replacement that Houston could find.
Yeah, and all three of
these guys.
And honestly, I'm sorry to cut you off. I'm looking at no more than 2 to 3 seasons. Maybe John Grenard, you may give him that 4th year, whatever the case might be, but it's one of those where you could kind of shake it up. But all three of these, no more than 3 years, though, or 2, depending on how you look at it. You go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, listen. I think that I would. And this gets tricky, and I want to look at it more a little bit later in this week when we can just have a conversation of the two. But of those 3 guys, and we haven't even got to Blake Cashman, but I think those are the 3 guys that will command the most money.
Mm-hmm.
John Grenard is a yes for me.
Mm-hmm.
I look at Dalton Schultz as a guy that can be replaceable. And if he's replaceable, like I've said before, that money could be allocated elsewhere. But if Houston does decide to bring him back, if they come together on good terms, then I will look at Sheldon Rankins and I will say, man, you had a great season.
Nah.
But we are also, hear me out, we are also shelling out right now $8 million to Malik Collins. You can bring Sheldon Rankins back. Again, that would eat up a lot of money of your available cap space. Or do you look at trading Malik Collins in order to make room to bring back Sheldon Rankins? And then you'll have money. You won't have a lot of that money for Malik Collins on the books no more. You probably pay a little bit of that. I think I was playing around with the little transaction thing on a spot rack right now. You would save roughly maybe $6 million. And do you use that to address other needs? But what I want to say is, guys, I don't think it's financially smart to just re-sign all 3 of them, because now you are handicapping yourself. Your hands will be tied if you re-sign all 3 of those players, because now how do you address some of the other needs at the other positions? Do you re-sign Blake Cashman, or do you look at that as a player that you can absolutely replace? Do you re-sign, some of these other guys, or are those guys replaceable? Steven Nelson is a free agent. What do you do with Desmond King? Which is why I'm adamant on drafting a cornerback at 23. My mind will not change on that. You need a young guy. You need a young dog that can run with Derek Stingley. What do you do in those situations? Because you still got to build up what, guys? Depth. We've seen this team, thankfully CJ was a magician back there, but we've seen this team get very crippled when depth started to be a question because the front runner guys were just getting hurt or maybe not playing as well. What do you do? And allocating nearly $35 million for 3 players. And again, we're not talking about if Houston restructures contracts, which we got to talk about that as well, because if they do that this year, then now you're looking at handicapping your salary cap for the following couple of years. We're not talking about that yet. We're talking about right now what makes sense financially and re-signing all 3 of those players. As much as I hate to say it, because they impacted the Houston Texans in some positive ways this year, is that financially smart? I have to say no. Cody, let me ask you a question. Let's talk. It's late night. You've knocked out several projects. You got one more to knock out, but you're hungry. But you got to get this work done. You got a deadline. You got DoorDash right on your phone. What are you DoorDashing? What's your go-to meal?
If it's late night, I think I'm a Popeyes, man. Plain and simple. Plain and simple. Popeyes. I'm gonna get my 5-piece. I pay for that extra chicken. I don't care. Get my 2 thighs, my 2 legs on my breast, man. I'm good. And they got the best biscuits. I don't care what y'all say. They got the best biscuits without the water.
Without the water. Okay. He's from New Orleans. But the best thing about that is what, guys, I just mentioned, he had a deadline to meet. Cody has a lot of deadlines to meet, and he didn't have time to leave the house. But that's why we're telling you about DoorDash. With DoorDash, it's very accessible. You can download the app to your phone, but it comes in handy in times where you just don't have time to hop in your car and go get food. And we know about the football game, the Super Bowl, right? If you were late on getting everything that you need, DoorDash is your friend. DoorDash is the all-in-one app for your everyday needs, from restaurants to groceries to even flowers and gifts. Don't wait last minute, but if you do wait the last minute, you're realizing on the way home, oh my goodness, I didn't get everything I needed for Valentine's Day. Don't fret. DoorDash is right there. So the next time you're running low on dinner ideas, pet supplies, or just time, you can get so much more than what you realize delivered straight to your door. So whenever you have a watch party or you're watching anything, whether it's football, boxing, however you want to watch it, whenever you want to watch it, whatever you want to watch, get your food and snacks delivered with DoorDash. DoorDash, your door to more. Head to the DoorDash app to get everything you need delivered.
Welcome back in, ladies and gentlemen, to this Monday installment of Locked On Texans. And as everybody know, man, the last episode of Locked On Texans, John and myself, man, we opened up the show talking about how excited we was that Mr. Andre Johnson became the first player in Texan franchise history to make the Pro Football Hall of Fame. And we're not going to spend too much time on this because at this point, man, what can you say about Andre Johnson? I mean, well, first of all, you can say a lot about Andre. We could go on and on and on about this. But over the weekend, man, NFL Network had put together a phenomenal program called The Knot, where they went to everybody who made the Pro Football Hall of Fame class of 2024, and they surprised them to give them the news at their house, man. I'm pretty sure everybody saw the clip. And John, you was one of them making fun of Chris Carter. Chris Carter, of course, knocking on Andre Johnson's door here in the city of Houston.
I wasn't making fun of him, but
but the look on his face.
Chris Carter gave one of them, and it is February. It is Black History Month. Chris Carter gave one of them, my dog.
Exactly.
So, shout out to CC, man. I love CC.
I do too, man. And of course, one of the all-time greats by far. But yeah, man, I just wanted to highlight that. And the reason why I called this this last segment number 375, that is the number that Andre Johnson will have going into the Pro Football Hall of Fame, man. And that was my favorite part of the video that they showed. Chris Carter saying, Mr. 375. And if I'm not mistaken, I think Chris Carter was 275, if I'm not mistaken. But, man, once again, shout out to Andre Johnson, man. By the way, Chris Carter said that when you look back at Andre Johnson's career, he said that he was a mixture between Sterling Sharp, Shannon Sharp, older brother, who definitely would have been a part of the Hall of Fame class if he had not had gotten injured. I think his career ended with like a neck injury, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
But
you know what? Did you know he wasn't supposed to play in his last game?
Yeah,
because of that injury.
Yeah, I know, man.
He went out, bro. The numbers he put up, was a fool.
I still think that he should be in, man. But I understand and I get it. The Pro Football Hall of Fame does have a lot more qualifications to meet, unlike the Basketball Hall of Fame. But Chris Carter said that when looking back at Andre Johnson's career, he said he compared him to a mixture between Sterling Sharp and DK Metcalf. You know how dangerous that is. Shout out to Andre Johnson once again, man. I cannot wait until the Hall of Fame comes around, and I'm already calling it the Hall of Fame game: Texans versus Panthers.
That would be kind of dope.
It will be.
Pep got in.
Exactly.
Julius Peppers, not Pep Hamilton. Julius Peppers got in.
That's what I'm saying, man. And that would be perfect. And then you'll
showcase for CJ, maybe a drive.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. For at least one or two drives, you get CJ versus Bryce. And I look at Julius Peppers the same way I look at Andre Johnson, man. Like during that time in the 2000s, you did not think about the Texans without Andre Johnson. The same thing with Julius Peppers, man. You thought about the Carolina Panthers. That was one of, if not the first player you thought about.
Absolutely. Who also scored 20 points in a NCAA tournament game. You talk about just pure athlete, crazy. A conversation that we will have this week, and this is coming from T.Y. Hilton. Can C.J. Stroud and Tank Dell terrorize this division like Andrew Luck and T.Y. Hilton did? I think that's a fun conversation.
I hope it lasts longer.
Podcast that T.Y. was on. So we'll talk about that. Let's talk about it tomorrow here on the Locked On Texans podcast. Thank y'all for listening and watching. Be sure to like, subscribe, and comment on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. Give me a follow on Twitter at John_Hickman12.
And as always, I'm your host, Cody M. Davis. Please remember to follow me on Twitter at CodyDavis_24. Once again, that's Cody, COTYDAVIS_24. Until next time, ladies and gentlemen, peace.